love, love, oh, till I hear the breath of the Spirit flowing in me.
Hello, welcome to Spirit of Life. My name is Geraldine Lee, your host, and our guest is Gavin Baulch. He is the presenter of Support Life, Channel 31. Hello, Gavin.
Hello, Geraldine.
It's great to have you back again.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you were very inspirational last week, and I'm just fascinated about your coat. It's a leather jacket with Mickey Mouse on it. Have you got a Harley outside?
In other words, am I going through a midlife crisis?
Yes.
Well, that's an interesting kind of introduction. I kind of wonder whether that's what we go through, maybe particularly as men. It's about, I don't want to grow up. I just want to stay as young as I think I am or something. No, I don't have a Harley Davidson. And why the Mickey Mouse jacket? Well, let me tell you about Mickey Mouse. Walt Disney is an inspiration to me. I love his creativity and vision. And I remember a true story from a friend of his who told me there was Walt Disney standing in the car park of Disneyland when it was the first morning it was to open. And he had his very bright tie on with Mickey Mouse on it. And the bitumen had kind of set, but it was in the process of curing. And he stands in this vacant car park. It's an hour to go. And he says, "Will anybody come?" Interesting for such a visionary, such a creative person. And they've never stopped coming. And of course you have Disneylands all over the world. Well, I remember The Sorcerer's Apprentice. Mickey Mouse, he's an apprentice and he has to do some bucketing of water and sweeping up, and he decides to take the task on himself, and he gets the little book of magic and he gets the little brooms to carry the water buckets for him. And so his task is that he just puts his feet up, and well, when he wakes up there's a bit too much water, so he gets an axe and chops all the little brooms up. And they turn into multiple brooms who have multiple buckets who...
Wow.
It's a lovely little cartoon from the movie Fantasia.
Yes.
Okay. You see, we're just apprentices in life of somebody. The great sorcerer, I'd call him my Heavenly Father through Jesus Christ. And I'm the sorcerer's apprentice. And sometimes I try too hard and I get myself into trouble. And we're asked just to learn and rest in what the sorcerer has told us and does. So I wear this coat because I found it in America. It reminds me of who I am. And I think we're all children at heart, not childish. The big difference between being a child at heart and childish. Childish is, I'm irresponsible. I'm not going to listen to any or take any discipline. I'm going to react and rebel. But it reminds me of the fact that in last week's program, having been a child abused, I actually did lose something. I lost what you'd have to call virginity, and I also lost my childhood. And in my 50s, I was praying one night, and I thought, Lord, I'd love to have that spirit of a child.
Yes.
You know, just kind of
Wonder
a throwaway. That's right, a throwaway line. I think. By the time I woke up next morning, it was there. I couldn't explain it. It was just like, wow. So I see life differently. I see the potential for every human being, if they've lost something very precious to them, childhood, virginity, whatever it is, this Creator God, our Father, actually restores it as if it was never robbed from us. Oh yes, it has in the real world, in the real sense, but we get something back in the sense of our feeling and our understanding that we are now of worth, of value to this mysterious, crazy Heavenly Father in the sky.
Yes, is it like a redemption?
Totally.
Redemption. I mean, I heard a preacher once talk about how children can't attach to their parents if they don't have a loving gaze, you know, and he would pray with people and he would give them a redempting gaze. And as he gazed at people, they would cry, and they would then be able to bond with people, because through their trauma, where their parents were not there for them, they lost that gaze, they lost that ability to attach.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah, and through that redeeming gaze, they were able to, attach to others in the future. Yes. And you work also with, have you worked a lot with males in your ministry? Because you do counselling, don't you?
But it comes as sort of par for the course. I just call it a chat on the sofa or the lounge suite, or wherever you're sitting, in the train, you're driving someone in the car, you know, because you're the driver, you've got the car, you've picked up a hitchhiker, whatever it is. And if you have a concern for humanity, and you have a concern that good is 4 times harder to do than mediocre and bad, right? It's to do and to bring the best out and to be the best. It's effort, and it's focus, and it's faith. It's all of those things. So it's 4 times the work, right? But if you see the benefit of that, and you see something better for the person who's talking about life to you, then, I don't know, talk about it if you're asked. Not, I'm going to tell you about it. I think human courtesy, when it's practiced properly, waits to be asked before it imposes, before it goes somewhere. Wow,
that's powerful. I'd be we're going for a break soon, but I'd be fascinated to hear more about male spirituality and how, because in Australia especially, there's those macho men, and how they, it's hard for them to melt their hearts and sort of come to God. And and I'm always fascinated to hear someone who actually reaches out to men, and which you've been a pastor and minister.
Yes.
So, So we'll probably go for a break now, but I'd love to hear more about that.
Okay.
You're watching Spirit of Life. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Spirit of Life. My name is Geraldine Lee, your host, and our guest is Gavin Baulch. He's the host of Channel 31 program Support Life. Welcome back, Gavin.
Pleasure.
Yes, we are talking about male spirituality in a sense of women, I suppose, are known more to be more spiritual, that's being in general, and male less spiritual. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we are all spiritual, as well as we live in a very material world, that we use our senses, touch and smell, etc. But I think men are very spiritual. In fact, I would say why there are more women in a church setting than there are men, for instance, or those seeking spirituality, is because they're very aware of their deeper shortcomings, and they don't need to be told again from someone that, hey, there's a flaw in you, we need to work at it.
Right.
So that's a very simplistic brushstroke, but I think that's the case. Men are about doing, building, creating, and one of the phenomena of maybe the last 20, 30 years in Australia is men's sheds.
Yes.
We don't get together and talk out our issues as women do so readily. We are contained, and we contain... Well, let me take you to a movie that's certainly just been released on DVD, called The Railway Man. And it's not about a man who plays with model trains, I happen to play with model trains. Nicole Kidman is in this movie. Fascinating film. Worth renting a DVD or going online to see it. Very good for men to have a look at this film, because it shows about the returned soldiers who worked on that Burma railway, and so many died constructing that railway line, and they've not been able to talk about it ever. Many have suicided. Many men who've gone into the theatre of war and come home have not been the same, have been unable to talk about it to the one who, for instance, their spouse, who loves them and would probably say to them, just talk to me about it, I'm here for you.
Yes.
And they can't. The horrors are so deep and inflicted. Men's sheds have enabled men to get together over a creative, what their interest is, and talk. Now, whether they talk about those experiences or not, it depends on one men's shed to another, but at least there's an opportunity to talk about realities and life and maybe past experiences and memory. If only you could. Now, this movie, and I'm not promoting a film here, but there's a very moving conclusion where the torturer and the man who returned serviceman meet, the one who tortured and the one who received the suffering, went through the suffering. And the one who has carried this torment comes to a point and says, you can't always carry hate around in your heart. You've got to love and forgive. And there's reconciliation. It's a true story.
Wow.
And this takes place, and you see it on the screen. Interesting story. Yes. Very real, very true. To your question, I think men are just as spiritual as women. Opportunities maybe not there as frequently for them to reach out and experience it.
Wow, I agree with you. And I've been reading, I read a book about males where they feel that they, that when they're doing something, they feel a lot more connected. And I know that my involvement in theatre has been such that men say that they feel so close to God, on stage, backstage, doing the lighting, the sound, and they just feel very connected in that building capacity. And you also are a presenter for Support Life. What are you very passionate about pro-life?
Okay. Well, now I've said this and used these phrases before. There's no ownership on pro-life, and there should be no ownership on pro-choice. They're just words that we've used in an environment. And I'm pro-choice in terms of I will support a woman through the full term of her pregnancy and to support her after, whether the child is terminated or not, to provide the help and the means through post-abortion trauma, or just to see that home help occurs. So I'm not trying to play with words here, but just claw back some ground. Pro-life, well, my story is about life. I'd lost my childhood through that trauma of child sexual abuse. There was a point where I would have longed for, a taste of that. And it was given back to me. And suddenly life now has a whole rich, full meaning. In fact, I'd add the word abundant life. In other words, the wow factor comes into a sunset, or whatever it is, relationship, a conversation with somebody, appreciating a nice garment, a leather jacket like this, and I've just touched the microphone, so I'm in trouble. And just a level of what I would call joy, and a level of knowing that I am worthy of love, support, sacrifice, grace.
Yes, you shared about how when you were 50s, you asked for a gift from God to have that childlikeness. Didn't
Yes.
you? Yeah, and that was wonderful. We'll hear more about that after the break. You're watching Spirit of Life. Stay with us. We'll be back after the break.
Blow till I hear but breath of the Spirit blowing in me. Blow, blow, blow till I hear but breath of the Spirit blowing in me.
Welcome back to Spirit of Life. My name is Geraldine Lee, your host, and our guest is Gavin Baulch. He's the host of Channel 31 program Support Life. Welcome back, Gavin.
Good.
You were sharing about your experience of the childlikeness that happened when you were 50 years old or
Yes.
such, where you got this gift to be childlike, and how it connects to support life and pro-life.
All right. Let me say, it's a gift as a child that we have. In fact, in our developmental years as children to teenagers to adults, what gets, I think, knocked out of us in Western culture is imagination, imaginuity, creativity. A child sees things, hears things, does things, is always drawing, is always creating, playing in the mud, coming inside. And I think we have a choice as very comfortably well-off, what are we, 5% of the world's population that has the income to spend that we do and homes that we do. We either have wall-to-wall carpet or wall-to-wall children. And yet we'll spend a lot of time saying, don't do this, don't do that, come back here, da-da-da, right? Where a child wants to go out, climb a tree, now we think of occupational health and safety and let's buy another jar of hand cleanser that's going to kill 99% of germs, and we bring in other problems because we're over sensitive.
Yes, that's
whereas life is to be lived and loved.
Yes.
And childlikeness was, I knew something had disappeared. I hadn't gone through it. I watched my grandchildren, I have 9 grandchildren, and wow, I didn't quite have that glee or that joy, or particularly when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, those years. And I remember just saying, oh Lord, as I saw it in others, how is it possible?
Yeah.
And so the expression is I was given it as a gift, but I think it's for us all. We just lost sight of it, right? And we didn't see a place for it. And I've spoken to the deaf community, and the title of my talks to them has been, "There is more to you than you can imagine." Because one of the magic gifts of a deaf person is they can imagine. In fact, they've not really been told that at all, or not much. And I stumbled across it because I was longing, when I taught film to the deaf community, to introduce sound. Now that's taboo for a hearing person to go out in that direction. Anyway, I did try something because I was intensely overwhelmed by what I could learn from this community. And I did introduce the topic of sound, and there was a silence, and then someone asked through an interpreter, "Tell me, I imagine that a drop of water being formed sounds like, or I imagine the wave on a seashore when it crashes sounds like." And they could make the sound so accurately, they understood it better than a hearing person.
Wow.
And suddenly I realised that they have, it's been unadulterated. It's this child likeness that continues and has never been taken out through this education system or by over enthusiastic parents like stop being a child, and they have this great capacity to imagine. And so do we. we just have to remember that we can, and we were created for life and to use imagination. Walt Disney had it.
Yes.
An extreme dose of wonderful imaginability.
Yes.
And so life now is important to me. So why would I want to deny a child its childhood? Or the potential to grow up and convey and expand their capacity to live well and full by using their imagination and creativity,
Yes.
and the joyousness and the glee that comes through the lovely smile and gurgle or giggle of a child. Why would I want to inhibit that infectious, what captures us all
Yes.
and turns us as adults? We don't talk our native tongue to our children. We go goo goo gaga, kuchi kuchi koo,
Yes.
a whole different language, right? We're trying to break into this world of this growing child, and we become childlike ourselves.
Yes, I love the childlikeness of children not worrying, because that gives them that the joy of the presence and yes. Yeah, it's great also your experience of not denying children that right to life, that right to that childlike joy.
Yes. And so supporting this package called life, which is a gift to all of us, really, I don't want to stand in the way of that life having its chance.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And do you find in your interviews, what's been your experience of that? The joys and the challenges?
Well, it's always been joy. It's just that you meet another human being, right? I have the great privilege of hearing another human being's story, and they're rich with hope and purpose and direction. When a young adult comes on, I've interviewed some, I think the youngest was about 18 years of age through, the passion for life and the compassion with life is intense. All of the major changes in the world, for good or evil, when it averages out, comes from people under the age of 21.
Wow.
We forget that, right? There it is, this passion, it wants to change the world. For good if it's presented, but if we present another story that's not for good, well, they'll change it for that as well.
Yes.
So the effort to maintain this trajectory on goodness and greatness and compassion and hope and joy and purpose is important.
Well, yeah, it's been wonderful having you on the show, and it's been very inspirational in life and the fascination for life and love. We wish you all the best, and goodbye and God bless you. Thank you. You've been watching Spirit of Life, and that's all for our program today. Join us again next week. Goodbye and God bless you.